Welcome to New Human Conversations. This program is hosted by Dr. John Ryan, physician, teacher, and the founder of Unity Field Healing. In this podcast, Dr. John engages in thought-provoking dialogues with luminaries at the forefront of human consciousness and spiritual evolution. Together, they explore the emerging landscape of what it means to be human in a time of profound transformation, where science meets spirit, and where new potentials for healing, awareness, and multidimensional living begin to unfold. Each conversation offers insight, inspiration, and a deeper understanding of the shifts taking place within us and across our world. If you feel the call towards something deeper in wisdom, something aligned with human evolution in these times, something more awakened, you too are part of this unfolding. Welcome. This is New Human Conversations.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of New Human Conversations. It's truly a pleasure to welcome a new dear friend, Suzy Miller, into this conversation. I recently had the wonderful privilege of meeting Suzy, and for me, there's already a deep sense of resonance, a very natural kinship that speaks to the shared values and the mutual recognition of something really meaningful unfolding in Suzy's work. I'm sure if you're new to Suzy and her work, you'll soon feel the same way in this conversation. You'll understand exactly what I mean. Suzy is a remarkable soul. She is known for her pioneering work with autistic children and the emergence of what she refers to as Awesomism. It's a concept which she shares in her book of the same title. In it, she shares her perspective that invites us to see these children phenomenon autism, not just through the lens of limitation, but through presence, intelligence, and a very different way of being. What I feel most in Suzy is not simply what she teaches, but how she sees and lives in this world. It's really remarkable. There's a beautiful openness, compassion, and a real willingness to meet life beyond the conventional framework. So, Suzy, I'm really, truly honored to explore this space together with you.
Thanks for having me, John. I'm looking forward to it.
And you're so welcome. Now, before we begin this, I feel this is a really special and auspicious kind of interview. And I feel an attunement to the feel of this interview. I know that there are people who are going to connect with this information and this experience. In a very quantum way, they're present in this space. And I'd like to take a minute together, Suzy, if you're okay, just to kind of close our eyes, to go inside and just feel a gentle centering so we're attuned to the feeling of where we're going in this conversation.
Sounds great.
And I invite the audience just to join us at this moment. You close your eyes, just go into your heart space. Feel yourself present energetically in that space. And just let yourself relax into that space at that moment. Just allow your mind and your heart to open and feel a beautiful attunement to the conversation, these very special children, to the whole experience of what is happening right now on the planet and how we're being given the support, the wisdom, the information to really attune to the forward evolution of humanity. And just attune to that energy. Just allow yourself to feel the energy. There's a beautiful buzzing. Beautiful. And so we'll come on back into this space and we'll begin. That feels really, really good, Suzy. So just as we begin, maybe we'll take a few minutes, Suzy, for people who may not have been exposed to your work, just to take a few minutes of just introduction, kind of let us know a little bit about you, your background, and the whole concept of Awesomism and where we're going to go in this conversation.
Yeah, I was, pediatric speech language pathologist and had graduated with my master's degree in 1986. And in 1986, there was no conversation about autism whatsoever because it was like 1 in 10,000. So by 1999, I had started where I got introduced to a child diagnosed with autism. And it was really one of the very first ones I had ever interacted with. But this was just no average child diagnosed on the spectrum. This young 4-year-old boy walked right up to me in the daycare center, and he looked me in the eyes, which, afterwards I realized was unusual. He looked me in the eyes and he said, "Master." And when he said "master," I had some cascade of energy run down through my body. It was some visceral kind of experience. And I remember thinking, who was the master here? Whatever he was tuning into or whatever he was aware of, definitely something I did not know about myself at the time at all. I didn't think there was any mastery, especially in that moment. But basically what ended up happening, John, is I took him to the back of the daycare center. He's walking around saying, "It's the millennium, it's 1999, and no real functional speech. And as he was doing that, all of a sudden I saw what appeared to be a body of light floating above his physical body. And I had never seen anything like that before. I didn't know what I was seeing. I tried to get it to go away. I was seeing it with my physical eyes, not just my mind's eye. And it wouldn't go away. And when I couldn't get it to go away, I literally just asked what I think anybody would ask, like, what the heck am I seeing? What is this? And I said that in my head. And when I said that, I heard the same little boy's voice come back to me, and he said, "That's my light body. You're here to put my light body back with my physical body." And so he basically took me through a year-long process after that, where he taught me how to integrate light and form, you might say, and at the end of that year-long process, he was now verbal. He was communicating verbal. You could ask him questions. Wasn't just rote communication. And that was really just the beginning, because from there, thousands and thousands of clients later, and they're all both coming to teach me something, and also to share with me that they know exactly what they need in order to support their own integration. So that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. So.
That is so amazing. It's so amazing. Now, I want to jump into that a little, but before we jump into the details of what you're doing, I want to spend a little bit of time kind of on a more personal level. So before this point in time and having this amazing experience, were you oriented to spiritual thinking? Were you interested in new age concepts? Did you have, any kind of experiences while you were growing up, or, so you had a girl, where you knew you were being prepared to have a moment like this?
Yes and no. That's a great question, because I feel like I went through a lot of fluctuations in that, like I think a lot of people do. When I was very young, I was very aware that there were two conversations happening all the time. There was the conversation of what the adults in my world were speaking, and then there was also the underlying current of that. And as a young person, I was typically answering or responding to the questions, the conversation that wasn't being had, in front of everyone, right? And so that got me in a little bit of trouble, because very often I would say things that were hidden. Yeah, known but hidden. And also, I think when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I remember standing out in the front yard of my house and looking up in the sky. And my mother came out onto the front porch and she said, "What are you doing? Like, what are you looking at?" And I said, "I'm waiting for the kids to come." And she was confused by that statement. It's like, go play with the kids in the neighborhood kind of thing. They're not coming out of the sky. But there was, although I didn't know at the time why I had said that, that was kind of like demonstrating the direction I was going to end up going. But that said, like right prior to Riley and to meeting this little boy in 1999, prior to that, I had been part of a Gnostic Orthodox monastery. And I was part of that monastery mainly because my mother-in-law at the time was part of it. And I was very interested in the Essenes and Gnosticism and all of that. So I almost felt like in retrospect, that was me closing out a particular piece, because other than that, I had had no, like I had had experiences with who I would refer to as the Mother of God in the Gnostic Orthodox Church or the Gnostic Orthodox Monastery, but connections with her and that kind of thing, but no multidimensional sight, no telepathic abilities, no. I would have considered myself more religious in some ways at that point. So yeah, it's been kind of a mismatch of everything. But I do remember when I got married, and my mother-in-law at the time was into a lot of different things. I remember thinking, she's just weird, I became her in spades. Yeah.
You share in the woo now.
Yes, exactly, in a big way. Yeah.
That's so really, it's really. Now, as you sort of coming from that space and beginning to have like this first experience with Riley, with the early children encounter, how did you live the moment where you realized the normal mechanisms of communication were dissolving? Like you can't strictly work in a verbal format. You have to come up with other ways of relating. Tell us a little bit about that part of your experience.
Yeah, for me, in some ways, it was almost instantaneous, John, because as soon as Riley telepathically communicated with me, it was not just that telepathy opened for me in that moment, but there was something about him reminding me of my own mastery, maybe from other incarnations or things like that. But that first year was not just about helping him learn to communicate and integrate more into his body. I was expanding exponentially. I mean, I had guides showing up, and I had telepathic communications with other things and other beings, and all kinds of things were happening. So to me, it was more like, okay, this form of communicating, beyond verbal communication, it's available. Like, it's here. Now you just have to figure out how you're going to navigate that in your daily life, kind of thing. And I just remember really early on when I didn't know I could turn it off and turn it on and that kind of thing. It was just like noise everywhere because telepathic communication was everywhere. So it wasn't, it was really about learning how to navigate that capacity, I would say. But what I know at this stage is, after, I don't know, 15,000 plus clients and, in classes and all that, everybody is telepathic. Not everybody is receiving that telepathic message, but the capacity is there. And I truly believe that the only thing that stands in the way of that is we're so conditioned to pay attention to just one form of communication. But the truth is, I mean, we've all been in situations where, we sit in somebody's presence and we just can feel deeply into that presence and know things that words or conversation can't really tell us. So, yeah, I think it's have to learn to navigate it for sure.
That's true. It's interesting, but it's beautiful what you're sharing, Suzy, because it's a demystification. Like we are not used to perhaps thinking we can do that. Like many people today are familiar with their clair abilities, their audience, their sentience things, but the vast majority of people, even though they're very gifted in these abilities, do not recognize that it is that ability or that that's really what they're doing. And I love that demystification, because I think especially for people, we'll get into this as we go forward in the conversation, but for people dealing with, these with autistic children and things in their life and in their family, they're using these tools every single day of their life. And I think it helps us perhaps to become aware of what they're about. I sometimes use the analogy of a radio. There's different levels of the radio, and you don't know where to tune in at first, and you learn to tune in, but you can also learn to turn off. You can
Yeah.
you can listen, you can shift channel, you can listen to different things, but you can also learn how to turn off the noise of that, and how to be still and have your own space. I think that's really important what you're sharing. And it sounds like the kids, as they started having these experiences with you, they were, they were teaching you as much as perhaps reminding you or catalyzing and perhaps that awareness within yourself.
It definitely felt like teaching sometimes. Sometimes it felt like a knock upside the head every now and again. But one of the things I want to say about the telepathy piece, and then I'll go back to this, is I think what's so interesting about kids diagnosed on the autism spectrum is they can't be conditioned like most of humanity's been able to be conditioned. And so what they have access to, because they are not able to be conditioned, is much more expansive than what those of us who have been conditioned have access to. And so I think that's just part and parcel why they're able to, not why they're able to be telepathic, because we all are. It's why they utilize that capacity first and foremost. Why that's primary for them and verbal communication is secondary. So that's that piece. And I lost the other part of what I was here. So go back and.
Yeah, sure. So we're moving into a little discussion, I think, around the concept of how the relationship of these children opened up this portal, I guess, of wisdom, like of communication in a brand new way that allowed you to realize the gifts and abilities that you have, and how your interface with these kids really was a catalyst for that awakening.
Yeah, and it did. It felt like every single interaction that I had, they were helping me expose more of myself. They were revealing more of me to me. And very often they would do that simply by asking me to interact with them in the way that I had never interacted before. Or they were asking, like, Riley basically interacting with me through telepathy said, "You're telepathic. Now use that skill." And then somebody else would come along and say, either telepathically or using their spelling board, they'd say, "I need help energetically kind of organizing myself right now." Well, I didn't know I could energetically help anybody organize until they were inviting me to that. And it was like they were pulling old masteries from me. And the more they pulled them from me, the more I utilized those on a daily basis, the more I knew I was capable of utilizing them. And then it becomes just part of the daily routine. This is just what's happening because it's available, not because anybody is special or anybody is like gifted in ways other people aren't. It's just that the more we utilize certain skills that we all innately have, the more we just know beyond a shadow of a doubt that we can use those for the benefit of others. So
it sounds like they brought an incredible comfort around that integration for you. Like there's such a non-judgmental energy around everything with these children, and they need a space for that to kind of flourish. It's like it's a beautiful concept.
They did, and like I say, there were moments where I thought I had it all figured out. like, we get just enough information to be dangerous sometimes. And I would really think I had something that they were teaching me like really figured out. And an example would be a child came to me, or a young man, he was 16, came to me and he just said, I want to be a better communicator. And I immediately jumped back into my speech pathology brain, and that way of thinking, even though I knew all of these other things. And when so I assumed he wanted to verbally communicate. And other children that I had worked with had come to that. So that's what I thought. And he would shut me down over and over again. And finally I had to ask, it's like, Jordan, is it that you want to verbally communicate? And he said, that's not what I said. That's not what I asked for. What I asked is to be a better communicator. And what he explained to me is, he said, most people out in the world don't listen to a 16-year-old boy. But the fact that I am a non-speaker, the fact that I tap out something on a board, which means people really need to lean into, they need to be interested, they need to pay attention. He goes, I just want support in being a better communicator. He said, and if that includes verbal communication, great. But if it's just helping people lean in to what I have to say because I look the way I look and I act the way I act, that's a better communicator too. It's like he was, and again, I would go, okay, that's humbling. I will step back and just address what's actually being asked of me in those moments, not what I think those moments are supposed to entail.
Our own programming or way of thinking. Yeah, it's amazing because it's when you really listen to what he perceives as improved communication, like to be a better communicator, it's how to engage people to actually listen and pay attention. And when you think about that in our world today, it's so true. Like, think about how we're listening to respond to things often, or we're listening to know how to answer, or that type of thing. But when you really listen to someone with your heart, the space you're in, it's a very different experience. We're all learning. We don't already know.
Yeah. I bet.
And I can see how the children are bringing that home. They're really bringing that down to earth in their interactions with the world. Do you ever wonder why how come you ended up in this predicament? Of the work you do? I say that tongue in cheek.
Yes, I've asked myself that question a lot. And, it's only in retrospect where you start putting pieces of the puzzle together. And I don't think that they're pieces of the puzzle from just this lifetime by any chance. I think we're all remembering in this incarnation, this one in particular, in ways that maybe we haven't had the opportunity to remember before. And to me, it's just like a jigsaw puzzle that's all going together, like maybe having experiences with the Essenes in other lifetimes brought me to a moment when I would be part of a Gnostic Orthodox monastery, or being connected to other realms and realities, maybe in other lifetimes, gives me access to the other realms and realities that children diagnosed with autism have access to. So, yeah, to me, I still can't figure it out, John, to be honest. But what I will say is that over time, it's like it fills out a picture that we're all so much more than we perceive ourselves to be. Because if we just look at ourselves through the lens of this lifetime, or what we think we're supposed to be doing, or I think we miss so much of what's available to us. And what I will say is these kids, without a doubt, have just continually opened me to more than I perceived myself to be. So
That's amazing. That's amazing. And when we sit back from the process, Susie, like you realize something on a big scale is really happening here. Like it's a mosaic, and you realize that the experience you're having, it fits into your own soul's history, your other incarnations, why you may be playing this role at this time on the earth, just as these children are playing a very unique, specific, and special role at this time on the earth. But it speaks of humanity. It speaks of a process that's so collective and so evolutionary, on a very big scale. And we realize behind it, there's like a master plan. There's something, there's something going on that we're not all privy to, but we can conceptualize. Because there's certainly something in the works here. There's something really magical and beautiful and mysterious at the same time happening while we're living in a very three-dimensional space and integrating the process. And something you said earlier really touched me, because a lot of the work with these children specifically is about helping them bring their light into their body. It's like incarnate their spirit. Yes, and so how do you see that tying into the picture? Like, what's been your experience in that?
well, it's this is a big conversation right here. It's like I think, first of all, I want to say I believe that all of us are disconnected from ourselves to one degree or another. I think just by virtue of the fact that we have human incarnations, and human incarnations are filled with love and joy and beauty, and they're also filled with trauma and drama and other energies as well. So I think to one degree or another, all of us are disconnected from certain parts of ourselves. And I remember once the collective consciousness of these kids said, you look at us and you say we're disconnected, but did you ever consider that maybe we're a reflective mirror of where humanity is disconnected from itself? And I thought, whoa, that's, from that moment forward, it was almost more like, how can I more fully get connected to myself? So there was that. As far as them integrating, you might say, light and form, or however you want to perceive that, again, I think for them, it's not just light and form, because we're all navigating that. We're all getting little glimpses and remembrances of who we are beyond the body, right? All the time. These kiddos, they know who they are beyond the body. They know what it is to function in a field of oneness. That's why telepathy is easy for them. That's why awareness or mind reading or reading emotional bodies, all of that, of course, if you're functioning in a field of oneness, that's just the way it is, right? So I don't think for them it's so much about how do we get light in form. It's more like, how do we create an environment around them that matches their frequency? So it's like any of us. We are born into a family. That family might have all kinds of amazing capacities and abilities. And if they do, they're reminding us of that all the time. They're reminding us of amazing capacities and abilities. And so we demonstrate that. We feel regulated within that. We grow into that. But very often, from one generation to the next, children are being born into lineages, you might say, where the lineage before them is mired in some kind of conditioning that limits their awareness of who they are. So now you have this big, bright, beautiful soul coming in with all of this awareness, and the environment that they're coming into, through no fault of anybody's, cannot fully mirror that particular child's capacity. And so the child starts trying to formulate, regulate around that. children diagnosed with autism, their field of consciousness is so heightened, so refined in many ways. They come into, no matter what family they come into, it's going to be very hard for any of those people in their lineage to give that child a clear reflection back of who they actually are. And without that clear reflection back of who they actually are, they become dysregulated, right? It's like, I don't know how to navigate in this world based on who I actually am. And the amazing thing about this population is they cannot dumb themselves down in order to figure out how to fit in and how to regulate. They'll stay in that higher frequency. So to me, that embodiment for them is really getting people to understand who's standing in front of them. Like, yes, I understand that the body looks weird and it's dysregulated and they can't communicate. And again, through no fault of anybody, if you're looking at that, that's what it's going to feel like. But the invitation from these kids is really to see them beyond their physical conditioning, see them beyond that physical expression. And for that to happen, we need to slow down, just like what we did at the very beginning of this call. We need to step back into our hearts. We need to start to regulate ourselves. We need to at least play with the idea that something more is possible than what's in front of us. And every single time I've watched parents, professionals do that, where they're really self-regulating, they're really starting to invite themselves into presence, all of a sudden now you're looking through the eyes of presence and you see these kids through a completely different lens. And that's when things get really exciting, because once they know that they've got a connection point with you, they'll take you on the ride of a lifetime, multiple lifetimes maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful because we kind of make a transition, because I think in the early days of autism, and especially for people who work in medical environments, we're used to everything being in a medical model. We have to see and find the nature of the problem, as opposed to the observation of the condition, just kind of being able to look at it with that open mind and that open space. But so much of the early focus on autism has been around the problems and managing the problems, and understandably so. I mean, it's a very, very challenging experience for both sides of the story, right? But it's beautiful to see us move out of a diagnostic space and into a more observational space, kind of a realization that there's something magical contained within what's happening. It's not a problem per se. It comes with all of the experiences and things that are part of it, of course, that everybody has to navigate, but to see it through that different lens. And I think that really is the beauty of the focus of your work. It's seeing it through that new lens. And as you've worked with these children and you've kind of been in this sacred space of presence and, being in attunement with the energy of these kids, what comes to you? Like what radiates from that space to you as the purpose for why this is happening? Like what's really going on?
Great question. It's relational. I think the purpose is to learn to relate to ourselves beyond what we've been conditioned to do. So we all have, it's almost when we start making connections, or when I've made connections to these kids and they've opened me up to experiences that I never even knew I could have. I didn't even think that they were possible, nor did I think about them in any way until you're having that experience. So it's like to me, it's always been a relationship to deeper parts of myself. This is their invitation always, again, there's more to us than meets the eye. And when we start even having a little bit of inquiry around that, we start opening in new ways. Yeah, I can't even begin to say, John, like some of the things that I had conceptual ideas about, or maybe just heard through my own meditations or that kind of thing, only to have one of these kiddos show up, either on Zoom or in person or in whatever way, and literally demonstrate to me the truth of that. Like, show me what those words mean. Yeah. It's like, so that's a whole different kind of relationship to information. It's a different kind of relationship to ourselves as human beings. It's a whole different relationship to unconditional love, because I think that that's what they're drawing us toward all the time. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, of course. It's beautiful. I'm just reflecting as you're speaking, and I ask you this question kind of as a personal question, but it's really a question of guidance, because so many people are learning to navigate this space. They're open-minded, they're open-hearted to phenomenon through this lens, I think, but they're still living in the reality of all the things they have to live with and navigate and move through. What sorts of things did you find in your experience that you had to let go of within yourself to genuinely meet these children?
Yeah, well, that I knew that what I was looking at was, or what I thought I was looking at was the way it was. So I definitely had to, and it's one of the blessings of getting a master's degree in 1986 when there's no information about autism whatsoever, because so many people are so gifted in working with them, through speech pathology and through all kinds of other ways. And they have a lot of information about them to work in those ways. But the ways that the kids were inviting me to work with them was beyond my speech pathology training. It was beyond what I even knew a speech pathologist could do with this population. And so to me, it's like, I was really grateful in retrospect that I had no training, because they had to train me. They had to teach me how to be of support to them. And I think that so many people do, and with big hearts, like kind hearts, everybody in a helping profession, especially therapists, teachers, everybody goes in wanting to be of support to this population. And they want to be of support to them through the lens that they know that they can offer support. I would just say, be curious. Don't assume that we know what is needed or what's required, especially by someone who functions so differently, clearly functions so differently than we do. And so I think that the kids used to always say to me, curiosity, just stay curious, stay open. And it's just amazing how much they can show you when we do that. I was just in a class this morning, and I tell people all the time, as much as we want to love and support and help this population, and you're right, lots of challenges in not being able to fully be themselves in this world at this time. So absolutely, we need to be of support, kind, loving, compassionate, supportive in all the ways that we can be. And at the same time, I always want to invite people to be open to what they have to offer us, because there's so much. It's mind-boggling how much they have to offer. And as soon as they have a connection that is open, they immediately start showing you what they have to offer. And so I think going in with an idea, or at least a curiosity about what can I learn from them, as well as how can I support them? So
beautiful. From your experience, Suzy, like I know there's a wealth of gifts that come from what you just said in that moment. What kinds of things have you encountered or experienced, like as you work with these kids and families, and what kind of things have they started to teach or demonstrate or reveal or share?
well, I'll give you an example of one that still to this day, when I think about it, it just hits me so deeply, because prior to seeing this young woman who was 16 at the time, non-speaker, spells to communicate, I had worked with her quite a bit up to that point, but that was the scenario of this particular session. Up to that particular session, I had been hearing the timeless nature of being. Like in my meditations, it would just like a phrase that would just go by. The timeless nature of being. What does that even mean? Like what is the timeless nature of being? And I also would hear things like, we're timeless. It's timelessness. We're functioning in a timelessness. And I was like, I don't understand what any of that means. So that was about a month prior to this session. This young woman's mother reached out, scheduled the session. The mother said, my daughter wants you to help her become better at what she's currently doing. And what she was currently doing, and I already knew this, was she was almost like an angelic presence to children who were being abused, being hurt, being whatever. So it was almost like if a child would call out for support. This young woman heard all of that and responded. And that's just what she knew she was doing, because she wasn't so connected to her body, right? So she was out doing that. So her mother said she would like help being better at this. She doesn't want you to tell her not to do it.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. So she comes on the session, and this was during the time of COVID. And you can imagine people are stressed. There's a lot going on. Kids weren't going to school. She was getting inundated with information, prayers, calling out to someone, and she was answering. So we were working energetically. She was showing me what needed to be shifted within the different energetic fields so that she could be more present in this. And as we're going through, she's showing me all of this. I don't know any of these things unless somebody shows it to me. So she's showing me exactly what to do in her field. I'm shifting things around. And then all of a sudden I said to her name was Graciela. I said, Graciela, it's really interesting to me, because as we're reorganizing your system, it's like you're going to be a voice in the world for those children that in that moment, they need a voice. I find that very interesting, because you don't have a physical voice. You don't have a spoken voice in this world. And yet this reorganization it's almost like you give them the impetus to stand up for themselves or say what they need to say in that moment. And I said, it's like this. I said, when I was 16, I was in a situation where somebody was standing over me. I was on the ground. They were standing over me and they were yelling at me. And in that moment, I jumped up and I poked the person in the chest. And I said, you have no idea who you're speaking to. I ran upstairs, collapsed on my bed. That's all I had. I said, it's like that, Graciela. It's like you, and then it dawned on me. I'm saying it's like you're going to do that, like what happened for me. And then I said, oh my God, was that you? Was that you? timeless nature of being, timelessness, right, is the theme we're working with. She starts pecking out on her spelling board, and her mother reads it back. And she said, Graciela says that she has known prior to this incarnation and in this incarnation what she does for children who are in need. She was happy to be of service to you.
Wow.
Wow is right. So in that moment, I'm thinking, I was 16 then. If that resource wasn't available to me in that moment and I hadn't stood up for myself, I might not be a person who could sit in front of this 16-year-old and support her. And then she would not be going on to support all the other 16-year-olds that she's going to go out in the world and support. I'm going, timeless nature of being. There is no time. There is, and you could have told me that through, I could have studied it in physics. I could have looked at it in all kinds of different ways, but her taking me through that particular process and it moving in that way, I've got that in my bones. Like that, so when somebody says, we're going to go back to change something, or we're going to go forward to see what that's going to look like, I now know that that's possible because she demonstrated it to me, not because she gave me a lecture in it. Yeah.
That's amazing. You can really see the multidimensionality of what's transpiring in these moments. It's fascinating because when we live from the perspective of being on the earth and dealing with things in the linear way that we're by no fault of our own, just very accustomed to. It's the way of things.
It makes things feel stable, which is good.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's necessary.
Yes.
Like in order to be present in the world, I guess you kind of need that stability and structure and things that go along with that. But at the same time, introducing this multidimensional capacity. Mm-hmm. And like I believe, from my work, from my experience, that we're doing things like this. We too are doing things like this, even though we're present and more anchored in form right now. The soul, we're doing many, many things, like when we sleep, perhaps, or when we meditate, or work together in energetic groups and do things. We're influencing the energetic dynamic of the earth and the stability, the love, the healing that can take place in space by doing those kinds of things. And all of the work seems to be, I call it work, but I'm not sure that's the right word. All of the experiences seem to be focused around the healing process, like the restoration process, reunification, a unity process. Like it's really something that the whole thing is bringing us towards. And I wonder if the kids share with you, like, do they ever give you glimpses of the future, or what will happen as human beings learn to integrate these functions, these capacities, these abilities that they're teaching in this way?
I think it's already starting to happen. I think that the fact that there's so much awakening taking place right now, that people are talking about things now that 10 years ago they didn't even discuss. It's it's clear we're evolving all the time. And one of the things that the collective consciousness of this population has shared often is, because we're more conditioned to separation, it's like, I have this body, you have that body, I'm in this location, you're in that location, that we underestimate how powerful what we do for ourselves is for all. That there is an interconnectedness of all things that's always existed, and we're just growing back into it. So when we pause for a moment and we set the energy, that sets the energy not just for you and I, but for all the listeners, for anybody that might come across this to tap into. It's also true that if if I take time for myself and meet myself with a little bit of love and care and compassion for something that I'm going through, that's not just good for me, that's actually good for others, at the very least, others who might be witnessing me in that process. But even more subtly, everybody who's looking for a little bit more love, compassion, and understanding for themselves gets that every single time we model that. It's also true, and we know this. I mean, there's studies about this all over the place where, a group of people that pray for something, a place completely on the opposite side of the planet to them, it has an impact. And these kiddos seem to be functioning more in that world of interconnectedness and oneness, and functioning from there much more. But they just are reminding us all the time that, what we do for ourselves, we do for all. What we do for all, we do for ourselves. And it's a good reminder. It's a good, especially in days like today, days like these kinds of days, these moments where there's so much changing in the world, and people think, I can't do anything about it. Like, what do I do about it? You regulate yourself, you find some peace inside. It has an impact.
Definitely. That's beautiful. I'm just curious. I'm going to ask this question, Suzy, more for people listening who may have experiences they're trying to navigate or learn to navigate themselves. When you're with these kiddos, what are some of the experiences you have? Like, how do these communications unfold for you? And I know it'll be different if we ask this of different people, but just share with us a little bit about what happens, say, in a session or in your time spending with the family or with one of these children, and how it unfolds like as an inner process, just so people can mirror from that and learn from that in their own experience as well.
Yeah, and what I will say, because I don't work with people physically anymore, but I do work with a lot of people who still are working with kids physically, and I want to speak to that first, because when you're in a physical space and have that particular individual right in front of you, there is so much information that's being exchanged in that moment that it really is helpful to almost stabilize ourselves, close our eyes, find our breath, be connected to that first before we start engaging. Because when you've got that physical person right there, there's just not telepathic communication going on. There's all kinds of communication going on. So I just want to speak to that, because it is a little bit more difficult to find our own sense of balance when we're in that physical proximity. For me, at this stage of the game, I see people over Zoom. Sometimes the kids are physically present. Sometimes the children are not even physically present. Usually parents or professionals have a lot of questions that they would like to ask. They have experiences that they would like to share. And basically, for me, it's like a three-way conversation. The parent is in their world, having their perspective of what's going on. They have their concerns. And then the telepathic communication directly with that child that I'm connecting with, that's a whole different world. So it's almost like, for me, it's more like a binking back and forth between dimensions, being fully present in one, and then coming back and being fully present and in the other. And sometimes that takes a little translation.
For sure.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like, no, I can't say it quite like that. That won't. And sometimes I've seen something, and very often I'll go back to the individual diagnosed with autism or the individual that I'm telepathically communicating with. And I'll just say, how can this best be heard? How can I share this? These individuals live with their families all day, every day. They know all the nuances. So sometimes even asking that kind of question makes it much easier. But for me, it's literally like a three-way conversation. I say that quite a bit. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Now, when you're here, again, this is really just for people who are having experiences, either in their family or as practitioners assisting families. But when the children speak to you, how do the ideas show up for you? Like what happens? How do you translate the telepath part of the story?
At the beginning, I was hearing their words. It was almost like they were having a verbal communication with me, but in my head. And I'm very grateful for that, because I don't think if it had come in other clairs, in other ways, that I would have trusted it quite as much as I initially did. Now it comes in through a variety of avenues, you might say, and it really has to do with who the communicator is, who's communicating with me. So sometimes, very often, it will still be words. Sometimes, and most often, I would say it's pictures or some kind of imagery. Sometimes it's just a knowing that tell the parent this story, like personal experience story. Tell them that. That's what's going to make the most sense. So it comes in a lot of different ways, but I will say that the sense of knowing, just knowing, to me, I had to evolve into. I know a lot of people who start with that. And like I said, if I started with that, I probably wouldn't be here having this conversation with you, because I'm not sure I would have trusted it as deeply. But I'm always so floored by people. It's like, I just know and this happens a lot between parent and child, because that connection is so deep that I just know. And you'll hear parents say, I just know what they're thinking about. I know what they're talking about. That is telepathic communication, that beyond a doubt. So yeah, for me, I still like communication, pictures, make it simple for me, because sometimes what they're sharing is multidimensionally very complex. So yeah.
That's fascinating. And I would imagine too that they have a pretty avid understanding of what for example, a family situation, what the parents are living or thinking, feeling. It may be a little harder for the parent to relate to the child than the child to understand the parent's situation or experience. Is that fair to say?
Very true. And just because the children are not actively engaging does not mean that they're not fully present for the experience. And I've had so many children who have kind of maybe moved from non-speakers to spellers and spellers to speakers who share just that. It's like, I've been here the whole time. It's like I've been in maybe witness or observation mode the whole time. And most times when I say that to a parent, they go, oh my gosh, because things have not always been smooth or easy, right? It's like any of us, I'm a mother of 4 daughters. Like, you told me the same thing. I was like, oh my gosh, I hope they didn't do that, or if it, yeah. But the truth is that they do see from that vantage point, and they have compassion, right? They do see from that vantage point, they see all, and they have compassion. And very often what they will suggest is that, again, to the parents, to the professionals who have a deep love for this population, we need to have compassion for ourselves too, right? It's like they can have compassion from us because they can see all that we're navigating, but they really are asking us to have compassion for ourselves too. Yeah.
That's amazing. And just to know that it's capable to observe with no judgment, like with true mercy, true compassion. It's profound because, of course, the innate human experience is to think, "Oh no, that I can't believe I thought that, or it was here, or said that," in my head. I think a lot of people would be afraid, of being exposed or.
Well, and it's hard.
Yeah.
These parents are put in extremely challenging situations. The day in, day out of somebody whose body's not functioning very well at all or has no relationship to their body. That, for the person who's taking care of the body, you might say, that's beyond challenging. Anybody in those same scenarios would be thinking all kinds of things that they would not think under, easier scenarios. So it's not about judging anybody. A matter of fact, the judgment of ourselves or of themselves in that regard, it doesn't help. It just doesn't help. Some compassion, literally, I say this to parents all the time because they'll say, "Oh, I had a hard time doing with this," or "This was really challenging." And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, if you asked 100 people, if you were in this situation, how would you handle it? Most people would be curled up underneath their bed, like just trying to hide from the experience. And yet these parents are navigating these experiences all day, every day. And so please, no judgment around that for them.
So important. That's incredible. It's interesting because as we speak about, spelling and becoming verbal, and for people who may be new to the topic or don't have personal experience, with autistic children, the words are, a lot of autistics are nonverbal, that they speak, they don't want the language that they're. And a speller is a child who learns to spell using the aid of a board or a lettering device to be able to communicate concepts through that form. And I think with the advent of the telepathy tapes that have, really touched so many people in such a broad way because of the beautiful way that that program was put together. And I'll put a link for the telepathy tapes in the show notes for the interview in case people haven't experienced that or seen that, because they're really profound conversations done in a very professional and respectful way. And they introduce, I think, all of us to the topic from the perspective from which we're speaking about it right now. So it's the open-mindedness and the understanding of something bigger taking place. But in that light, there seems to be a timing to that. Like there's, the telepathy tapes came onto the scene. There was a big sharing of information, kind of an explosion of information and experience for people to encounter and perhaps open their minds with. But there's a timing to that, even though there's no time. There seems to be in this world a timing to
Yes.
it. Like, what did the children share around that? Like, what are your thoughts about that versus why that's happening now?
Yeah, they were very specific about that particular topic because, like, in '99, when I started with all of this, there was so little conversation about telepathy and about all these things. People thought you had three heads if you were saying that children diagnosed with autism were actually helping us evolve, right? So, but what I've watched over the years, you think about somebody who's maybe 30 now, who's diagnosed with autism, very hard road. Nobody understood, nobody saw, and yet that vibrational presence was still here. Those kids were still here. And there's a reason why we went from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 41 or 1 in 38, whatever the current statistic is. It's, if you think about it from an energetic perspective, that's a field of consciousness that's coming in and building and building and building. So early individuals, 30s, 40s, 50s, diagnosed with autism, very challenging experiences, nobody understood. And over time, it's built ahead of steam, you might say, until it could get to the place where both vibrationally, there's enough of them here to open us up to them, right? And also, there's been enough of small little pockets of people opening up and having experiences with them that couldn't be explained yet, but that was all building too. And, I remember Kai put out the telepathy tapes in, I believe it was September of last year, and maybe 2 years ago now, I can't remember. But I just remember that year, at the beginning of that year, I heard the kids, the collective, say, "We're landing. We're coming." And I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" And they said, "Well, we're landing. We'll be able to be seen. We'll be able to be heard." And so I was like, okay, and I knew Kai not too long after that. We had conversations before the telepathy tapes came out. And so we were looking at this whole concept, and it was beautiful and it's exciting. And then when it actually dropped, and she's such a beautiful filmmaker. She's so articulate in the way she offers this to the world. It literally went supernova, is what it felt like. And it was also a building of more and more of this population coming in, and more of the population that was already here being ready to receive more than they had perceived available before. And just like you say, that timing piece, it's like, we can't make that happen. We can't organize that to happen in that particular way. But to me, it's just the complete union of that frequency being here and that frequency being able to be received happened. And Kai was right in the middle of it, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing, which is also by design, I'm sure.
Well, and one of the things I said to her a long time ago is like, these kids know exactly who the right person is for the job. It's like they knew what her intention was. They're seeing it from that broader perspective. So yes, she's the one. And she's done an amazing job.
Yeah, it's amazing. So amazing. I remember first being exposed to the concept when Lee Harrow, I don't know if you know Lee, and Jan Tober, they introduced the Indigo Children. I think a lot of people have heard about the concept of the Indigo Children. But there's been such an evolution since the original, the original conceptualization of things changing, in different ways. Now, not everybody who would be an indigo child, for example, would be autistic, but it all was starting to happen at the same time. It's almost like there were autistic children and indigo children and children with other abilities and uniquenesses around them, as when we're coming onto the scene in a slow over a period of time. And there really is an evolution in the phenomenon. What's been your experience in that light, Suzy? Like, how have you seen things changing since the early days when nobody even knew what this was to where we are today?
This is a really great one to reflect on, John, because in all honesty, when I was working with the kids diagnosed with autism, at the same time, like you say, the Indigo Children, and I was running other projects at one point where kids that were not diagnosed on the autism spectrum, they had all kinds of amazing capacities. Their clairs were wide open. They were telekinetic. They were doing all kinds of interesting and strange things. And what was fascinating to me is, aside from the communication issue with children diagnosed with autism, very often the child would display exactly the same capacity, right? The exact same capacity. And one person would call that an indigo child, and another person would call that autism. And it was fascinating to me because what I noticed is, at the time, people that were already more open, you might say, or had my kids, I'm laughing because my kids were at a Waldorf school at that time. And so a lot of the kids in the families that I were working with, they were just more, they were more open. They were more kind of, I would say, hippie-ish. They were more like kind of granola families. It was like, so they were open to something beyond, you might say. And then there were other families that were maybe more vested in the medical model, more vested in more structured kind of education. And they would call the same child would go and get a diagnosis and be autistic, right? And so, and especially early on, when a lot of the autistic individuals I was working with were speakers, I was like, I can't tell the difference. Like, if I'm just interacting with you as a human being, you have the same characteristics as somebody who would be called indigo or crystal or those kinds of things. So I also have a feeling that some of those other diagnoses that came before autism, ADD, ADHD, looking back, I also see that if we're looking at those as energetic templates, that ADD and ADHD came before autism. That was the diagnosis of those decades, right? They came before autism, vibrationally setting up the capacity of those diagnosed with autism to even be able to be in a body at all. And I remember early on, the kids would say, well, ADD is just attention in different dimensions. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense if that's a precursor to children diagnosed with autism. So
That's amazing. It's really special because it goes back to the concept, that there's a big plan here. Like there really is a wheel turning here. So many things. And you can see how, from a very wise and loving and profound perspective, there's this integration of transformative intelligence and experience that's taking place. And it involves all of us, it involves the parents of these children because that's by design. It involves children themselves because that's by design. The stages, the levels, the aspects of transformation that have been introduced in sequence, like, from ADD through autism and all the things in between. We realize there's a setup. It's like a master plan that's kind of bringing us through this experience in some way. And there's no rush to it. It's not like there's a race to get there. You can see that, the wisdom of the cosmos kind of playing a role in this, because the timing is not the issue. It's the process and the fulfillment of the process. But it gives us a lot of hope. If you step back and think of that, you realize that humanity is being challenged in a multitude of ways. And, on the 3D screen of reality, to managing all the challenges that the transformation of the scale brings. But that means there's a reason we're living through it. We're doing it on purpose. And it's meant to take us somewhere that would ultimately be for great good and great love. And I think we need that in these times. Like, we kind of need to have that perspective a little bit, because it's so easy to get caught up in the problems, what's wrong, issues, all of that kind of stuff. And, your respect of awesomism really is that in full form with me, because you're seeing it through the lens of that transformation. But it's so big, Suzy. Like, it's so vast when you really let your mind wander, right?
yeah, and I think that the vastness of our being exists, and we can see the world through that lens, right? And it's also true that we have challenges as human beings, but I also think that we grow into our vastness by kind of rubbing up against some of those challenges. It's like, I think that's custom designed, and I think that our souls know very well what kinds of challenges we might need in order to expand into the next phase of our evolution. And I know this for a fact, listening to so many parents of children diagnosed with autism that have come to me over the years. Every single one of them said, I would never be talking to somebody like you if I didn't have my son or if I didn't have my daughter. I wouldn't have gone down this road of maybe opening to more of the unseen world or a more spiritual path if I didn't have this challenge to meet, and I'm not saying that the child is necessarily the challenge. I'm saying the opportunity of that connection can be very challenging, but there's something so flipping powerful about rising to that opportunity. And I have a lot of respect for parents, especially of children diagnosed with autism, because when you look at them energetically, John, I've never seen a population of parents who have chosen to fast track themselves in such a profound way. And fast tracking is not easy. Anybody who's had a big spiritual awakening knows that once you have it, you got to reorganize your whole life. There's nothing easy about that. But just because it's not easy doesn't mean that it's not evolutionary. I think that's what we're living right now.
Yeah, that's true. Often say to people that I'm working with, and it's, as a human, we have our fears and trepidations, but the soul is so courageous. Like, it will take on these
Yeah.
experience. We've all done it, in different ways. It'll take on these incredible experiences that, as a human, we've gone away from, of course. But the soul says, no, there's a great wisdom, bounty, and there's a big purpose in doing this. So we'll forge ahead and carry on. It brings with it the courage and the luminosity and the faith and the dedication, all the things we kind of need to go through are done. And so
that we can actually embody that capacity that our soul has known we've had all along. It's like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. It's magical. I could talk to you forever, Suzy, but I'm going to try to wind this up a little bit. I'm not quite sure. I could have so many more questions I want to ask. But just as a note for the parents who are listening or who are the experience of seeing this from different perspectives, like, there are parents who are very open-minded, very seasoned in the kind of thought we're having, and parents who are very far away from that in their experience. Just, I want you to take a minute just to share with that group. Really, what would you say to that group of people to bring the best?
The group that's experienced or not, more experienced or not experienced?
Both. Like, just if you were talking to a room full of parents or families who have a diversity of experiences, what would you say to this group, knowing to be in full compassion and full wisdom and full understanding of where they are? What would you say?
Well, first, I would invite everybody to turn that compassion in on themselves, because nobody's doing this wrong. Nobody's, everybody is doing this with the best of their capacity, given what they were given. So just turning inward just for a second, like, honestly, I would just, like, hands on the heart, just for a minute. This has been really hard. And just for a nanosecond, I'm going to have a little bit of compassion for myself because it was really hard, right? So there's that. The other thing that I would say to every parent, no matter what they know or don't know, is, again, stay open, stay curious. Let's assume that we don't know, but they do know. let's assume that they're in there, right? Assume that they're picking up everything and anything. How would we connect and communicate with somebody? What would we share with them if we assumed that they were picking up everything, even though they didn't look like it? Yeah. So I think that's really helpful for those parents who are just starting out. What I want to say is, again, your kid's in there. Your child is your child. Your child is not a diagnosis. And I think very often we can get so caught up in the diagnosis. And I understand why, because a lot of times when you get that diagnosis, the very first thing you're told is all the things that your child will never do, right? It's like and if we can just give ourselves just a little bit of opportunity to say, my child is still standing right here in front of me. That's my kid, right? That's my kid. Let me get to a relationship with the child, not so much the relationship with autism, right? I think that's huge. And I've seen so many kids really blossom just because, oh, I'm not a diagnosis, I'm a person. I think that that's huge. For people who have already had telepathic communication or are expanding into the multidimensional world of those diagnosed with autism, I literally would just say to them, pace yourself, because it's a world that once it's opened to you, or once you're open to it, it has so many opportunities. It can take you in so many different directions that I think it's as important that we have these big experiences like we all can have with this population. That's one thing, but I think it's as important that we step back after one of those big experiences and allow ourselves to integrate it, allow ourselves to kind of reorient into the physical world, ground again, be present again, because they will once they've got you, they will constantly expand you. And I feel like that integration piece is so important for people who are already deep into this path. So
It's so beautiful and powerful. Just on the same note, the work you're doing, Suzy, like you've been doing this work for over 30 years, I guess, at this point, and you've had so much rich experience. I know you're beginning to share your work, you're mentoring other practitioners of birth with families. Maybe just take a minute and tell anybody in the audience who wants to reach out or connect with sources about your work or services that you're aware of that may be useful to them, just to share. I'll put some links in the show notes too, or things we talk about. But I'd like you to take a minute to share with the audience.
Yeah, there's we just started a new mentorship yesterday. Mentorships run for 3 months, so about every 4 months, one of those is offered. And I love those mentorships. We're basically just going through any questions people have on any given Tuesday, on any given Wednesday. We're practicing telepathy. So we're really making that connection and practicing plugging in and expanding that capacity. So that's fun. I just last year I offered a 6-month apprenticeship, and from that apprenticeship now have 5 team members who are also going to be offering private sessions. I'm not offering them as much as I used to anymore, but these individuals are really gifted in that way too. So that's available. I also just started about 3 months ago working with a team from Leela Quantum Technology. Over the years, John, I've been invited to work with all kinds of different tech companies,
Yeah.
and like these guys, I'm just in love with. I swear, basically, we came to the realization that we could create some frequencies, a frequency broadcast that would basically insulate the kids a little bit more so that they were getting more of their own reflection back instead of getting the projections of everybody around them.
Wow.
We also created a frequency for parents, which they call creativity support. And it basically just allows, it almost just kinds of creates a backdrop or a frequency support so that when parents are going through, just enormous changes because of the children that they have, or maybe their child is growing in new and unusual ways, it's like it just gives them the fluidity to move with that change. And we just added something I was so excited about, frequencies for deep self-love and compassion, self-forgiveness, no blame, no shame, no guilt. Just a little bit of a broadcast that's just reminding our fields that we can function from there. So that's something I'm really excited about. And I like projects right now that will impact lots of people, as many people as possible. So that's one of them. And then I think the thing I'm really enjoying, almost the most right now is the New World Portal. And that is just, it's not necessarily just for parents of children diagnosed with autism or those involved with them. It's really about embodiment. It's basically energy work and support through those multidimensional layers so that we can all kind of come back and be present with as much of who we are as we possibly can. So, yeah.
That's amazing. And that's, I think, is another conversation we're going to have.
Okay.
Just hard to
I love that.
explore that with the scene. Yeah. Phenomenal. And I'm just so inspired. I have questions in my head. But we're going to wind it down. And I think we have to have another conversation. So many more things I want to touch on. But we'll do it in the form of another time together if you're open to that.
Absolutely. I love talking to you.
That's wonderful. So just as we prepare to sign off, Suzy, any final words? You shared so much wisdom and so much love. I feel it full already, but if there's anything else that you just wanted to say before we do that.
No, just what the kids have shared. I mean, we really are going in a positive new direction. And it doesn't mean that there's not some, deep challenges along the way. But I think it's just really good to remember that we're custom to designed to rise to those occasions. And the more we do, the easier it is to get where we're going, to remember what we're becoming.
Yeah, exactly. So beautiful. Well, from my heart, Suzy, I want to say such a big thank you. It's been a blessing to spend this time together. Like I said at the beginning, we've just started to get to know each other, but I feel such a beautiful kinship. It's like I've met my sister. That's how dear you feel to me.
I feel the same way. Exactly.
So good. So, dear listeners, as we come to the close of this conversation, I think what stands out for me is not only a new way of understanding autism and awesomism, but really a deeper invitation into compassion, patience, presence, all the things we know spiritually wise, and I guess an integrating part of our own future as a human race. And I think we're on the threshold of that. For those living with autism and for the parents, so the caregivers, the families walking the path, I know the journey can be both meaningful and profoundly challenging. But it's my hope that this conversation has offered not only a broader perspective, but a sense of support and understanding that you're seen, your experience matters, the ways of relating that honor both the uniqueness of these children, the reality of daily life, the deeper context and potential around that is really treasured in your heart. And if Suzy's perspective is new to you, I trust you've really found something here that is both moving and intriguing and perhaps offers a gift that you can take away from the conversation. I really hope so. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of New Human Conversations. Remember to like, share, subscribe, all those good things. Share the message with people you know will be open and will receive it. And I hope you look forward to some more inspiring conversations in the days ahead. Every blessing to everybody. And again, big thank you, Suzy.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.